Even if you say like, okay, I'll try, the whole time you're struggling or juggling with that. Maybe I will go anyways. I could have a good time. I should get out more. This kind of wrestling act that happens, that's actually so emotionally draining that when it comes time for the day of the party and then you just decide, actually, I'm not going. Well, what's the experience for the other person? Disclaimer, I'm not a doctor or a therapist. I just have wacky off-meta ideas on how you can think about things a little differently. Contradiction theory is basically the idea that the greater a separation you can take from what you believe to what you do, like the greater distance you can accept, the happier you are. Well, say someone asks you, hey, come to my party Saturday. You can think in yourself, like internally, oh, I do not want to go. There's no way I'm going to this, but still say yes. And you might say, that's crazy. Why would I do that? But think about it in the longer run. So normally, what people would do in that situation, they'd be like, oh, I don't know. I'm kind of busy, which kind of can often snowball into them like half exploring if you have a legitimate excuse or if you just don't want to go. And a lot of times you are already in contradiction theory land. You're trying to convince them that you do want to go while desperately trying not to go. So you're already in total contradiction. So instead of going that path, you could go the other path and just say like, yeah, I'd love to go. Awesome. And then when the time comes to actually go, or maybe a day or two beforehand, you can, message them or see them and say, hey, oh, sorry, I can't go. You will find actually that because the whole time you gave yourself the peace of mind to just assume you're not going to go because you don't want to go and not put the burden on you in the moment to have the perfectly balanced cocktail of, oh, I would go, but blah, 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 but I hope you don't invite me to another party. It's very messy and very painful for everyone involved. And a lot of times, even if you say like, okay, I'll try, and the whole time you're struggling or juggling with that, you're like, oh, maybe I will go anyways. There could be, I could have a good time. I should get out more. This kind of wrestling act that happens. That's actually so emotionally draining that when it comes time for the day of the party and maybe you were like trying to go and then you just decide at that point, okay, actually I'm not going, either just for, emotional reasons or something comes up. Well, what's the experience for the other person? Well, the other person kind of got from the very beginning that their expectations should be mixed and basically they didn't know what to expect and where they stand. Like, do you actually want to go to the party? Do you like me at all? All of those questions, when you kind of give that gray area response, which is kind of typical politeness to do. If you're saying no to something, it's a crazy thing of society that when you say no to something, it's almost like you then have to put a lot of effort forth to convince the other person that you'd like to say yes. So why not the opposite? Say yes and decide to no. So interestingly, you've spent all this emotional energy like wrestling. If you don't do this, you've spent all this emotional energy wrestling with, going or not going, that you're going to probably feel a little bit defensive if you're like, oh, sorry, I can't go. And the other person is, kind of molding and seething perhaps on that idea as well, because you told them from the beginning that not to expect anything. So they're kind of reflecting on, whether this means anything for your friendship or relationship, which is legitimate, but that's just kind of a natural consequence of this. But you're in many ways emotionally drained because you've been trying to make it work in your head. That when they're like, man, you always, flake out on me. Like, man, what's up with that? You are not going to feel very, very sympathetic, very generous with, giving them a genuine apology. You're probably not going to be, I'm so sorry. I hate when I do this. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But likely, if the conversation goes too long, you might even, be like, well, you put a lot of pressure on me. I'm very busy. And unfortunately, conflict resolution in those environments does not usually go very well. Now, alternatively, from the other person's perspective, you're still not going to the party either way. But initially, by just being enthusiastic, like, yeah, I'd love to. First, you're by knowing that you don't want to go, you're kind of almost declaring to the cosmos that like, hey, you can't predict the future. You don't have omniscience. Maybe you'll change your mind. But if you don't, you can still say no either way. So when you get to that point, that day of the party, and you've accessed your inner contradiction theory, and you just said yes enthusiastically, you're like, oh no, I can't make it. uh, Fortunately, you've accomplished something that you couldn't in the other, which is that the relationship was not in question. And, maybe even just the confidence boost of you being excited about the party led them to be, more confident in asking other people and, and looking forward to it instead of like dreading whether people were going to end up at the party that don't want to be there. Cause that's the other side is a lot of times, you can arrange a social event, drag people kicking and screaming to it. And then like, it's just uncomfortable. So very interestingly, you have all of your emotional firepower, all of your energy saved because you haven't been wrestling with it. You just are like, okay, yeah, I'm going to say no, uh, either at a convenient point or something like that. Uh, Not even counting the fact that oftentimes you can say enthusiastically yes to something social, and then it gets canceled anyways. At which point, again, we're talking about game theory here. Morality is pretty questionable with this stuff, but think about it as an idea to empower yourself, emotionally. The reality is a lot of us deal with way too much and have a lot of pressure, but the worst pressure is the pressure we put on ourselves, oftentimes in direct reaction to the pressure coming from everything and everyone else. So what does that all mean? What it means is, from the other person's point of view, they actually will have a more positive experience if you say yes enthusiastically with no plan to go than communicating, something closer to ground truth, which is, like, well, I'm not sure, but you're not going to stay on truth too long because they'll ask you questions and then you'll be like, no, I would go. And, or you're immediately tripping over yourself to figure out how to protect their feelings and also to protect your own. Your want to not go to the party is valid and a lot of times, very valid. And because of that, you are not obligated to be vulnerable with other people. Maybe part of the reason you don't want to go to the party is you think the guy or the girl, maybe they're being creepy towards you, or you think they have, you know, weird intentions. You could sense all these things, but you don't have to communicate them, and that doesn't make you a bad person. I think in that regard, the morality is you are trying to protect yourself, and it's not a good thing for people to see, as far as being vulnerable with with your feelings to people who are not safe to be vulnerable with. And so on that point, very much, contradiction theory allows you to make quick, decisive moves as far as what you say or do in any situation, where you don't have to um, create these elaborate, nuanced explanations of your emotions and thoughts. You can just, go for something and then, override your actions because, this isn't like a locked in choice, where you have to, carry through the idea of this for all time.